Hello, everyone. It's Annabeth, and welcome to my course research presentation. The book that I did some research in this quarter is Memory, and I've read a few essays from this collection in a previous quarter. So I thought this was a good opportunity to kind of cherry pick specific essays that align with the concepts that I'm working with. And then I used some of that research to then go find some artists that are working with similar themes. So these were some of the main questions that I had starting this research. How are contemporary painters using memory to construct these psychological spaces rather than depicting literal events? If they are depicting literal events, how are they doing so? How can paintings visualize memories that cannot be photographed? If memory is fragmented, emotional, and tied to places rather than truth, how are these contemporary painters visualizing those qualities? So I touched a little bit on these first two essays at midterm, but one of the first writers that I came across in the book is Maurice Halbachs, and he is really the person who has introduced the idea of a collective memory. So his main argument is that memory isn't something that we create completely on our own in isolation. Even our most personal memories are shaped by the people around us, by our families, the communities that we grow up in, and the cultures that we exist in. So he says that he remembers things through social frameworks. So, in other words, the people around us help determine what we remember, how we interpret those memories, and even what we forget. I think it's really interesting because it challenges the idea that memory is objective. So, two people can experience the exact same event, but remember it completely differently because of the roles that they played in that environment. So that connects a lot to my own work because my paintings usually start from experiences from childhood that feel very personal, but I'm becoming more interested in how those memories aren't just mine and how those memories have stuck with me and why they have. So a lot of my paintings are about the atmosphere that I've grown up in. So, another essay that really stood out to me was Pierre Nora's Realms of Memory. So, Nora is arguing here that memory and history are not the same thing, even though we kind of treat them interchangeably. So, he's describing memory as something that's living. So, it's emotional, it's personal, and it's constantly changing and it's carried by people. So, every time we remember something, we're actually reconstructing it rather than replaying it exactly as it happened. So, history, on the other hand, is an attempt to record the past as accurately and objectively as possible. So, history is based on documents, facts, archives, and actual evidence. So, one of the ideas that really stuck with me in Nora's essay was we cannot know in advance what should be remembered. We don't get to decide which moments stay with us for the rest of our lives. And it's sometimes those ordinary moments that become the most meaningful to us years later. I think this idea is why I enjoy painting my memories as these like psychological spaces rather than literal memories because I find that that's a more fun way for viewers to connect with the work, even though they've never lived my personal experiences. So they're responding to the emotional truth of memory rather than factual accuracy of their own history. So, memory is arguing that the past isn't something that we simply just recall. It's something that we continually reconstruct. It's emotional, it changes over time, it's often inaccurate, it exists in the body, and it shapes identity. So, I took this idea and started looking for artists, contemporary artists that are using this process of reconstruction, how they're using memory, how are they using memory visually? How do you depict something that cannot be photographed? So these are the ideas that I had going into this type of research. So some contemporary painters choose not to show memory clearly at all. So first up, we have Luke Timons, and his paintings are these faded images that feel like memories that are already slipping away. So he's using muted colors and blurred edges to create a sense of uncertainty in his work. He works from photographs, television stills, and historical archives, emphasizing that our understanding of the past is always filtered through images. So his paintings examine collective memory, revealing how ordinary or seemingly mundane images can carry hidden histories of violence, trauma, and political power. So, through these faded color palettes and these cropped compositions and sparse details at times, he's recreating these fragmented memories and kind of emphasizing how unreliable the nature of remembering is. So Timons isn't trying to recreate reality perfectly. He's trying to paint the way that memories actually exist in our minds. Over time, details disappear, colors fade, and he's painting the fragments that we hold on to. So, another artist using photographs and historical archives is Gerard Richter. So, Richter grew up in Germany during and after World War II. So, questions about memory, history, and national identity have been central to his work throughout his career. Rather than using painting to document the past, Richter is using it to explore how memory actually functions. So his paintings often begin with photographs, but as he paints, he blurs the image and gives it this feeling of uncertainty and makes it feel a little bit distant from us. And that blur is really important. It's not just a stylistic choice. He's attempting to represent the way that memories change over time. So details fade, and what's left is often more emotional than it is factual. So his work sits somewhere between memory and history. The photographs connect us to the real events, but the blurred paint reminds us that our understanding of the past is never completely clear or objective. So I think Richter's work is a great example of Pierre Noir's argument that memory is different from history. He's less interested in recording what happened than in showing how we continue to remember it and continue to reinterpret it. So one of the best examples of this is Richter's family portraits, where he uses these old photographs as a starting point to explore the instability of personal memory rather than simply just preserving it. Another one of his best known works is his October 18th, 1977 series. So, this is a series of 15 panels, all oil on canvas. And these paintings are based on newspaper photographs documenting the deaths of members of the Red Army faction. So instead of copying the photographs exactly, Richter is painting them in grayscale and again, deliberately blurring details together. So at first, the blur can feel a little bit frustrating as our eyes are sort of craving those sharp edges because we want to see the details more clearly. But that's exactly his point. So he's not asking us to investigate this specific historical event. He's asking us to think about how history is remembered. So the blurred surfaces create this distance between us and the event. So they remind us that our understanding of the past is never complete. Even when we have photographs or historical records, memory is always filtered through time, emotion, and interpretation. So rather than telling us what to think about these events, he's leaving these paintings open ended. So they feel quiet and unresolved, almost like memories that are beginning to fade, but still carry that emotional weight. So, another artist that I came across recently that's exploring memory differently from the previous two is this last artist, Doho So, whose work explores memory through these large scale installations. So, unlike the previous two, who are sort of painting memories as fragmented and uncertain and blurred, So is recreating the spaces that hold those memories. He's best known for his full scale fabric replicas of the homes that he's lived in throughout his life. So these installations are incredibly detailed. He's recreating hallways, doors, light switches, windows, and lots of tiny architectural features using this translucent fabric that feels almost ghost like. And what I find really interesting is that So isn't trying to rebuild his childhood home exactly as it existed, he's recreating what those spaces mean to him. So the installations become physical representations of memory rather than just representations of architecture. So his work is asking, how do the places we live shape who we become, and can we ever truly leave those places behind? So that idea really resonates with my own work because houses have become one of my main symbols as well. So the houses that I paint aren't portraits of my childhood home, they're more psychological spaces that represent the environments that have shaped me. So, like this artist, I'm interested in the idea that we carry our homes with us long after we've left them. They continue to influence the way that we see ourselves, our relationships, and the roles that we feel expected to play. So, even though our work looks completely different, I think we're both exploring the idea that memory isn't just something that we think about, it's something that we continue to live inside. Another particularly powerful aspect of So's work is this contrast that he has between the subject and the material. So, our houses are normally pretty solid, they are heavy and permanent, and his houses are translucent and lightweight and they're soft. So, they're giving that ghost like appearance. So, the translucency of the fabric is changing the way that we experience the space. So it feels more like walking through a memory or walking through a recollection of memories. So I touched on this a little bit in my week 2 presentation, but So's work reminded me of how I've been using three-dimensional objects in my work. So I've been sort of taking every cardboard box that goes through my kitchen and pantry and using them in my studio. So I have a bunch of these tiny little houses that I use to take reference photos with. So my studio is it's creating its own little neighborhood that I see some in the future as like a little installation that viewers have to walk through to get to my actual paintings. So that just has me thinking of my practice a little bit differently and how I can display, my process from start to finish. So after researching and looking at all of these different artists and how they're using memory visually, I started to ask myself, okay, where does my work fit into this conversation? So at first, I thought my paintings were simply about memory and just the way that I recall events. But the more I've researched what memory actually is, I've realized that that's not quite it. I'm not depicting specific events. I'm depicting what they felt like. So when I paint a giant figure inside of a tiny house, I'm not trying to recreate my childhood home. I'm depicting the way that it made me feel small and it made me feel trapped. So the houses in my work have become less like buildings and more, again, like these psychological spaces. So they're stand ins for the emotional environment that we're shaped by growing up. The oversized figures that I use aren't physically trapped, they're just emotionally tethered to those spaces. They're carrying memories, expectations, fears, and roles that they've outgrown but haven't fully left behind. So, something I noticed while researching these artists is that none of them are really documenting memory in a literal way. Timons isn't painting history exactly as it happened. Richter isn't interested in making photographs super realistic. And so isn't recreating houses so people can admire the architecture. They're using these mediums and spaces to communicate what memory feels like and that it is fleeting. So I want my work to feel familiar rather than literal because I think that's how memory works. It's rarely a clear picture, it's more of a feeling. So I think that my work fits within a group of contemporary painters who are using the figure and domestic space to explore the psychological experience of memory. So rather than documenting the past and the traumas that I've been through, I'm more interested in visualizing the invisible structures that memory leaves behind. So while memory is where my paintings begin, it isn't really the subject. So the real subject is this emotional architecture that memory builds inside of us, and how those invisible spaces continue to shape the people that we become and how we interact with the world long after we've left those spaces. So that is it. I hope you guys enjoyed my presentation, and I'm looking forward to some awesome conversations and feedback. Thank you very much.